I want to thank Yeshivat HaRetzion alumni for giving this opportunity to give a Dvar Torah. In addition, it's especially auspicious for me because Parashat Shelach is my bar mitzvah parsha, so this is really a lot of fun. In 1798, Rabbi Nachman, a young Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, made the decision to go to Eretz Yisrael. At the time, it was extremely treacherous. Napoleon's army had invaded Egypt, and the seas were difficult. Rabbi Nachman came to Turkey, and it was so dangerous, the Turkish community didn't even want to let him go on the trip. But eventually, he convinced them. He took a ship to the port in Yaffo and came to Israel. His protege, Rabbi Natan, gives several reasons in various places on why Rabbi Nachman decided to make this trip to Eretz Yisrael. The real question is, once he came, why did he go back so quickly? Within a few months, he decided to go back. They cajoled him to stay. He tried once. He eventually left, went back to Europe. So why did he go through the journey, such a difficult journey, only to return so quickly? I think in order to understand or to unravel this question, it might be worthwhile looking at a seeming contradiction between the Parsha and the Haftorah. In Parashat Shelach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Shelach l'cha nashim yaturu et Eretz Canaan, asher ani noten livnei Yisrael, ish echad l'mateo votav, tishachu kol nasi v'hem. To send people to go tour to Eretz, to go to Eretz Yisrael. Now we know they're eventually going to go to Eretz Yisrael. They're going to come back with the famous grapes that become the symbol of the tourism industry. But at the same time, this becomes a calamity, a b'chiyah l'dorot. They come back and they say how great it was. However, it's for naught because we can't possibly go there. So after experiencing and personally experiencing this calamity of the spies, why does Yehoshua basically do the same thing? Vishlach Yehoshua ben Nun min hashitim shnayim anashim raglim cheresh lemor. He tells two people quietly, go. L'chu re'u et haaretz vet Yericho. Go and see Eretz Yisrael and go see Yericho. So why does Yehoshua do the exact same thing when he himself experienced the entire event of the spies? Now, if we look closely at the two stories, we see that they're actually radically different. While on the surface, they're both sending people to go to Eretz Yisrael, the reason, the method are completely different. In Shelach, the pasuk says, Shelach chanashim v'yaturu et Eretz Canaan. V'yaturu, which eventually becomes in modern Hebrew the same verb or the same word to mean tourism, and that's why the grapes become the symbol of the Israeli tourist industry. They're going to tour Eretz Yisrael, to go see how wonderful Eretz Yisrael is. And look who goes. They're going to send the heads of the tribes, the Nasiim, these princes, and they're listed, and one can imagine the pomp and circumstance, one can imagine the flags waving and the cheering. They're going, it's all very exciting, and they come back with lots of presents, had a wonderful time, but you couldn't live there. It's too difficult. So it's not surprising when they went with such high expectations that that's what they got. If we look at the story of Yehoshua, it's radically different. He doesn't send one from every tribe. He only sends two. Meraglim, and here they're actually called Meraglim. They're called spies. The beginning of Parashat Shelach, they're called Anashim, very important people. Here the Meraglim, and how they sent Cheresh Lemor, he said to them, quietly go. L'chu u'ru'u et ha'eretz vet Yericho, v'lchu yavo beit Isha, and they then tell us a story. Go see it out. In the case of Shelach, Moshe seems to be sending people to go experience Eretz Yisrael and all of its wonders. And they come back a little disillusioned. In the case of Yehoshua, it's entirely a military exercise. The Mossad of his time. Go out and see how we can conquer Eretz Yisrael. My wife's uncle, Itchy Fuchs, Zichron Livracha, who used to be who was a chaver for many years at Kibbutz HaTzvi, he once told the following story. He says a guy goes to Shemaim, Rahman Litzlan, it's 120 years, he passes away, B'Seivat Tovah, he goes to Shemaim, and in Shemaim, he's given a choice. They tell him, listen, you seem to be balanced, your sheet is balanced between your merits and your demerits, you can choose where you want to go. So first they show him Gan Eden. He sees Gan Eden, and it's all, very nice, it's quiet and relaxing, but it seems a little boring. They then show him the other option. The other option of Sheol, and it seems wonderful. Everyone's enjoying it. They're having parties. So he says, I don't want the boring thing. Let me go to where the parties are. So they send him to the parties, and he notices that Sheol is really horrible. It's horrible. Everyone's tortured. It's a horrible experience. And he turns to the warden. He says, I understand. Before, when I first came, I saw the Gan Eden was so boring. And now I see here, this is just torture. It was so happy, and now it's so horrible. And they said, well, before, you just came as a tourist, and now you've made Aliyah. This was said by an Oleh of many, many years. The truth of the matter is that we notice, I don't know if you've noticed, but there seems to be a question that's coming up in Jewish education these days. There are many students who are complaining that their experience of Eretz Yisrael was simply summer trips or what they had gotten in Hebrew school or in day school, and it was all falafel sandwiches and flags and Israel Day parades. And they miss the point that Eretz Yisrael is not all the excitement and the flags. It's a real place. The state of Israel is a complicated state. It's a modern state with all the issues. We pay taxes and we work for a living, and it's all very, very difficult. Rabbi Nachman, going back to Rabbi Nachman for a second, Rabbi Nachman came to Eretz Yisrael. He tells the following story in the Likutei Moharan, the second volume in 116. There were a number of Hasidim who had predated Rabbi Nachman's trip. They had come to Eretz Yisrael, and this is fascinating. Shebal Medinot Elu, and they came from Europe, where Rabbi Nachman did. The Kavud Yeratam Sham Eretz Yisrael, and they lived in Eretz Yisrael. The Siprulo, and they told Rabbi Nachman, Shekodem Shayu Eretz Yisrael, Lo Ayu Yecholim Letzayir Letzman, Eretz Yisrael, Human Bazel. They originally didn't believe that Eretz Yisrael was really part of this world. Well, you saw Eretz Yisrael, Hu Olam Acher Legamre. They thought it was another land, a whole different world. According to the holiness they saw in the books, they didn't know the dirt was dirty and the rocks were hard and the soil required tilling. They thought it was a magic place. When they came to Eretz Yisrael, they discovered that it was a real place with all the difficulties. I think one of the errors in Jewish education, or at least Jewish education has come till now, is possibly that the vision of Eretz Yisrael and the state of Israel, Medinat Yisrael, has been one of a wonderland of summer trips and falafel stands. The matter is, the complex reality. We're just gone through a tumultuous war situation and even internal fighting between Arabs and Jews, and living here is complicated. It's wonderful, but it is very, very difficult also. It's a real place. So why did Rabbi Nachman go to Eretz Yisrael and then come back so quickly? Maybe the problem was, and this I heard from one of my teachers, Rav David Ebner, maybe one of the problem was the people in Europe thought it was a netherworld. They thought it was like this magic place. Rabbi Nachman felt it was important to go just to show people you could do it. You could arrive in Eretz Yisrael. Our teacher, our master, Rabbi Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Rav Lichtenstein, in By His Light, I read this in years ago, it was in the transcriptions, he says the following, which always touched me, basically the whole experience of Gush. He says, speaking for myself, I am far from totally identifying with the official Zionist ideology. I have the privilege of being regarded in America as a bit odd for being a Zionist, and Eretz Yisrael as being a little odd for being suspect as not sufficiently Zionist. But be that as it may, I would not go the full route with Rav Kook. I say freely that there are passages in which he writes of the importance of the state, its accomplishments, achievements, which bewilder me. One of the things that we received from our Rebbe, I think, from Lichtenstein, was a view of Eretz Yisrael as a real place. It requires serious work. That's one of the wonders of Yeshivat Hesder, combining Torah and serving in the army, because in order to build Eretz Yisrael, we have to relate to it as a real environment. In the case of Moshe sent people, and they were so excited, and that excitement was smashed against a rock once they saw that indeed it's difficult to be in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael requires a tremendous amount of work. Yehoshua understood that. And Yehoshua, when he sent spies, was a totally different experience. His goal there was simply to figure out how we could live in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Nachman, when he came back to Europe, became a symbol. Indeed, he knew it was a real place. And it was a place, not only was it on the map, but it was on the map that you could go to. I want to wish everybody a wonderful Shabbat, and we should all be zocha to a complete geula when all the issues in Eretz Yisrael, really the Mashiach comes and things are the way they're supposed to be, L'atid lavo.